All right, everyone, welcome back to the Missing Bridge in America. It's been quite the while since we recorded a podcast. Essentially speaking, it's been actually around 2 years since I've done this podcast, and I'm just really happy to be joined here with a special guest. But before I introduce the special guest, I just want to give a few updates of the podcast and what you should be expecting, and a few updates on my life. Because when I was doing this podcast, I was a junior in the university, and now I'm graduated. I'm working at a law firm, and so many things have happened throughout that period of time that have caused me to be quite busy. And I think it could be a whole podcast within itself, all those different things that happened within the past 2 years. Um, but another thing is that if you had previously been listening to the podcast, Gannon is no longer going to be part of the podcast. Gannon was my co-host of the podcast, and it is nothing bad. It was just we're going in our career paths, we're advancing in our careers, and it just what was going to be best for both of us. He's still doing great, and maybe we'll be seeing him as a future guest on the podcast. But I also wanted to introduce this guest without further ado. This is someone that I met recently in a Marco Rubio event, and I think it's someone that can be really inspiring for a lot of young people, an example for many young people. He graduated from FIU with a political science degree. He graduated pretty early for his age. I know you're interning for the city of Doral. You're really into history. I know you're always been posting about history and what's happened in the past, the day of, but in previous years, decades ago, centuries ago, and all those things. And I just know you're really invested in politics. And I just wanted to introduce Bryan Quintana. And, I don't know if you want to say anything, you want to mention anything, anything else that I may have missed about who you are, what you want the audience to know.
Well, first off, thank you for that introduction. I think that summarizes a lot of about who I am, and really, I thank you for that introduction, and I thank you for inviting me to your podcast. It's an honor to be the first one in the past, or since it's been done. So I guess the past 2 years, it's an honor.
Hmm.
And no, I mean, basically, that's just me. I'm a person that lives and breathes history, politics. To me, it's something that's important, not just for myself, but for generations to come. We need to know about our history. I think it's important that our youth love this country. Unfortunately, a lot of people, a lot of the young people, and I say it like I'm old. I'm not. I'm 20, but I'm saying it that way so you understand. We're becoming people that are starting to hate this country. We're starting to criticize it, and it's okay to criticize your country every now and then because something happened. But it's becoming something that's like ideological, and hating our country shouldn't be something that's always there. Because this country, if you compare it to the rest of the world, there's a lot of freedoms, and we need to preserve those freedoms. And I'm very passionate about the Constitution and preserving our freedoms and liberties. And I know you come from, well, you're born here, but your family comes from Venezuela. My family comes from Cuba, and we really appreciate the freedoms that we have here, and we can't take it for granted. And also, I'm very passionate about politics. I currently live in Sweetwater. I am interning for the mayor of Doral, Christy Fraga. It's a really great adventure, and I know there's more opportunities in there. I might or possibly I might get a full-time job there, hopefully, or God willing. And I'm looking towards running in my city, which is Sweetwater, eventually as a commissioner, and who knows, maybe mayor. And I want to keep on going forward. But right now, what I'm really focusing on and honing in is on getting to meet people, networking. I think it's very important. But enough about me. I want to keep this podcast going. So back to you, Bryan.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, I think it's great what you're doing. And I think a lot of people are very inspired. It could be you could be a great example for many people
Thank you.
regarding to that area. And I just think it's really important to be involved. It's really important to do all those things because sorry, politics affects so many aspects of our life. And just to think that we're, as a society, we could talk about young people, we could talk about other people, but we're constantly trying to neglect it, or we're approaching things in so many different ways, right? So whether we're trying to go on social media as a detox, as a way to vent, on our political disagreements, on all these other things, instead of actively going for change, instead of actively pursuing change in voting and just having conversations with people, right? Try to meet in the middle. I remember 2 years in the pandemic, right? I got really frustrated, and I guess I didn't really mean to speak about this, but one of the reasons I started this podcast was because I was constantly frustrated just looking at Twitter and seeing how many people were just going at each other without any grace, without any respect, right? And of course, there could be more extreme ideologies, there could be more extreme ideas, and I know 2020 was a year that had so much to it, so much controversy and all these things. We can mention so many things from Black Lives Matter to the elections to the pandemic, right? Like that year was insane. And I was just constantly frustrated that these people were not having productive conversations. And I was just realizing that the more I got to speak to people, the more I got to get to know people in a podcast format, I realized how much more reasonable people are. And even if I disagreed with them, I at least understood and was able to meet in the middle of some sorts. And I feel like so many people hide behind a screen, they hide behind so many different things, and I think that you lose courage. You lose courage, and you're more able to fall under extreme ideas like that. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I just think that was one of the big things that influenced my passion to start this.
No, I completely agree. I mean, if you look at our history, there's been moments where we've had very polarizing moments in politics, and we're in one of those moments right now. Where the parties, you look at them and there's extremes. Yes, there's obvious extremes, but we're very divided. That's what polarization is. There's a very big division, a big gap, and it's something that's been intensified in recent years. And you could throw the blame at whoever you want. I throw the blame at both parties. I'm a Republican, and I like to consider myself someone that's very reasonable. I like looking at. I'm a Republican, and I really do just stand with my Republican values. But I don't mind having a debate or speaking to someone that looks at the other side and trying to understand their side. And I think that's something that we've lost in politics, which is civility. I was looking at older debates, the one from 1960, where it was Nixon versus Kennedy. They were from two different political parties, but it was a very informational debate. If you look at the 2016 debates or the 2020 debates, it looked like two little kids fighting. If you look at the
Hmm.
1960 debates, it was all right. This is my policy. This is what I want to do. My opponent wants to do this, this, and that. And it wasn't. It didn't go down to personal attacks. Was there mudslinging? Yes, there was in political ads. But when it came down to the debate, there wasn't that. And so we're losing that. And if you look back at Reagan, which is one of the greatest Republican presidents of all time, during his time, there was a lot of bipartisan support, and a lot of Democrats actually voted for him. If you look at the 1984 election, he won every single state except Minnesota, which was the home state of his opponent, which makes sense. So yeah, we've lost a lot of bipartisan efforts, and I think we could do much more. And unfortunately, because of all these hyper-partisan moments and this polarization, it's not happening. And there's certain things that we could agree on. There's other things like, for instance, in my opinion, abortion we won't agree on ever. Guns, it's just very hyper politicized, and we're never going to agree on that either, which is unfortunate because there's a Second Amendment, but there's certain things that we could disagree on, which is fine. But there's other things like you could say infrastructure or maybe even education where we could come together much closer and bond together because we're talking about things that are important for everyone. Abortion, it's a controversial topic. Education for the most part isn't, even though now there's certain things that are going on, which is unfortunate. There's a lot of indoctrination in certain areas of schools, in public schools especially. And if you look at the whole gender issue and the whole gender ideology, it's going crazy. And there's a lot of issues that we could be much more closer and we could come together, and it would be healthier for our nation. Our nation, and I don't think this whole like polarization is going to destroy our nation, in my opinion, because we've gone through those cycles before and we can go through it again. I think there's going to be a moment where we're going to get tired of all this and we're going to start relaxing more, hopefully. But I would also say a factor of this is social media. There's 24/7 news, social media. People are throwing at each other, and people have nothing else to do, unfortunately. And so we're not being respectful. Why call someone stupid for saying, "Oh, Trump is the best" or "Biden is the best"? respect and be like, hey, I disagree with you. Or sometimes it's even better not to respond. And and so that I completely agree with you. We need more unity. I'm not saying that the Republican Party becomes Democrat or vice versa, but more respect, more civility between each other. And I think it's important that we have formats to do that. And then we could be the generation that brings that change. We don't have to do what a lot of these politicians and a lot of these people are doing right now, which is to fight just to fight and to get more name recognition out there. No, we could actually be proactive and not reactive.
There you go. I mean, that's exactly what I believe as well. And this hits all the way to legislation, right? Because if we're talking about polarization for our country, that doesn't benefit anybody because it doesn't have you don't have any substantive reforms passing in the federal government, in local government, and all these different areas of government, right? And I think that that is not something that as a society we want to see because it's very easy to say, oh, I think I should just, I think I should make peace with like all the people around me, right? Or you know what, I think it's important that we have more conversations, but it's much more than that because when you see that it's hitting our legislation, you realize, wow, like, our country cannot advance if we're not doing this. And another thing with social media is just blatant misinformation and all these other things that go around. And now you have voters that are misinformed, or they just saw one post, they saw one side of the story, and now they're going towards that specific side, or they're very influenced by a wave of politics that's been going on. And it's just a lot of influence that doesn't allow people to stay informed. But I guess going to the topic that I guess we wanted to speak about, because I know you wanted to speak more about youth involvement in politics, and I think it's great to speak about it. I think there's two very qualified people to speak about it in this podcast. You know, I was really involved in campaigning late last year, in the Marco Rubio campaign, and also for Americans for Prosperity, and I was constantly knocking on doors. I was knocking on people's doors. I was, you know, advocating for these people, and I faced some rather disrespectful people, I guess you can say. I faced a lot of more respectful people that were willing to have a conversation on these candidates, and I think it was just a really great experience to just be speaking to such a variety of people here in Miami, mainly immigrants, right? And I think it was enhancing experience because I feel like I had to just stop for a moment in my career and just focus on this. Like this is what I was doing at the moment, and I feel like it was for a reason. You know, I feel like it was for a reason. It opened my eyes to how much of an impact you can have in politics. Because for Americans for Prosperity, for example, I was advocating for a congressman for Florida, for the Florida House of Representatives, and he ended up winning by a couple thousand votes, and I had knocked on like 1,000 doors, right? And you see that, and you may, you know, maybe I didn't change people's minds, you know, maybe you're not having sitting down having a conversation with somebody, but it really showed to me. I'm like, wow, you can have so much impact that you don't even realize, right? But more than that, I guess, what is your perspective on youth involvement in politics? How can we be more involved? And I know there's not many people that will go to the extent to even campaigning, but just voting, just the extent of voting, just all these different things that can be minor shifts of the curve. What would you say in that sense?
Well, youth involvement, unfortunately, it's very low in elections and in general, campaigns, canvassing, you name it. And that's unfortunate because yeah, we're young people. We may people may seem that or look at us as now they don't know what to do. They're not that wise yet, this and that, and that's not true because you know we're very we should be involved. We're people that we have a voice, just like adults have or seniors have, and being a part of this democratic process of voting or of being a part of a republic that's what we are. We're called to vote. We're called to do that, and we need to appreciate it. We can't take it for granted. A lot of us take it for granted. I'm including young people, adults, elders. we take voting for granted, and that's unfortunate because you see a lot of countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, where people can't vote, and we're over here not voting. Why? And so it's important that we vote because our votes can change the way our city, our state, and our federal government works. If all of us participated, I really believe that our government would be much better. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Look, I'm campaigning right now for Ray, which is one of the commissioners here in Sweetwater, and I was looking at the numbers. He was talking about it. We have like 20,000 residents. Out of those 20,000, there's 11,200 that are able to vote. Only 1,200 people vote. That's
Wow.
terrible. That's terrible.
Mhm.
And that's not just for youth. And I know Sweetwater, it's not the most youthful city. There's other cities that have more young people, but there's young people here nonetheless. And unfortunately, we're not going out to the polls to voice our opinion. And that's what it is. Vote when you vote, you're voicing your opinion. You're voicing your statement. You're stating that I want this person to represent us, or I want this to happen. And I think what we must do, first off, nonprofits. I remember I received a letter from somebody. I remember the nonprofit name. I wish I knew it from the top of my head. It was a handwritten letter reminding me to go to vote. Funny enough, I don't even know why I got it because if you look at my voting record, and I go to every single election, primary, city, general, I'm that guy. And I received a letter from them saying, "Oh, don't forget to vote." And I was like, "Wow, this is a really good idea." And it's handwritten. It shows that someone took their time. So that's one way of doing that. Social media, definitely. We're glued to our phones, which is unfortunate because sometimes our phones, and for the most part, it's bad. There's a lot of content on there that we don't need to be seeing, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not here to talk about that. And another thing that we should do is remind people constantly and have more civics because I really see that our schools nowadays they're not really focused on teaching the basics of the civics. And oftentimes we don't care, but we should care. Voting is a privilege. If I don't vote, nothing happens. I'm not gonna get it revoked, but I should be participating. I should be participating in this process. And unfortunately, some people go, no, because every politician is corrupt. Well, that's a generalization because not every politician is bad. I've been around a lot of politicians. I can tell you who's bad, who's good. Same thing with, for instance, some people go, todos los pastores son iguales. All pastors are they just want your money. That's not true. There's some that are bad. There's some that are good. It's like everyone. So there's some that are corrupt. There's some that are good, and we can't just gamble away our votes. Oh, whatever, doesn't matter because our votes make a difference. Sometimes we complain, I don't like this guy in office. Then why didn't you vote him out? Or why didn't you participate in the election? Because for the most part, people don't participate. And then they're complaining. Don't complain if you didn't vote. Don't complain if you didn't vote. And it's important that we all participate, and for the most part, the way I see it, the most important elections are city elections. And unfortunately, most people just vote president, and then that's it. They don't do midterms. No. City elections are very important. State elections are very important. Midterm elections are very important. Presidential elections are very important. All of them are important. But what I'm trying to say is that the government that most affects you is local. Federal is usually the last one to affect you. Because federal, for the most part, it's the whole country. Yeah, sometimes, for instance, funding that'll come to the state, it affects you much more because let's say Marco Rubio gets 12 million in funding for a turnpike or something. That affects us, obviously. But local government affects you much more because those laws affect you right away. A federal government law will affect you usually in the few coming months, in a few weeks. It's different. So the best thing we could do is campaign out there with nonprofits, get people out to vote, register people to vote, let them know why they need to vote, and create a sense of like a call to action that of to vote because it's important. It's a privilege and to teach more about loving our country, about the civics of our country, and why this country allows us to vote, why we're allowed to vote. And we need to have that or take that into mind, into perspective that we're allowed to vote. And there's a lot of countries that are not allowed to.
Yeah, I mean that's all really good points that you mentioned there, and I think that I completely agree when it comes to that local elections tend to be the ones that affect you the most, and that's something that I do realize that you have way more of an impact on the elections that influence you the most, and it's so simple like that, but a lot of people focus on the macro. They focus on the D next to a person's name or the R next to a person's name, and it's about presidents, it's about the Senate election, and maybe if you're more informed, maybe you know who your congressman is, right? Especially young people. I've asked many young people, "Oh, do you know who your congressman is?" And like, ah, I don't really know, right? And this is not Florida congressman. This is U.S. House of Representatives in the federal government, right? And I think that that's important. I think that just being able to voice your opinion in those fronts, and it's completely true. Whether it's a street that needs to be fixed, a traffic light that you're just constantly having issues with, or the taxes that you face in your local government, like all these things, they affect you. The parks that are being established, right? And I had the opportunity actually in the city of Doral a few years ago, when I was in high school, to participate in the mayor's government academy with my sister, and I realized how much more of a voice people have in government, because it's not just about voting, but it's about the meetings they have, the hearings they have. And I remember they had said that they had a meeting of a park that they were initiating, and they had opened it up to all of the Doral residents to have a voice, right? And in this meeting, it was only like five people that ended up showing up. And imagine those five people had a pretty big say on what was going to be going on in the park, because people think, oh, I don't like this about that, or I don't like that they made this decision, right? But then they don't realize how much more involved they could be. And I kind of have a question for you, because I know that, at least for us, perhaps politics is a bigger passion than for most people. What would you say to those young people that maybe they're pursuing very different things in life? They're pursuing engineering, they're pursuing business, or so many different things, and maybe politics is, they have opinions, but they just leave it as the last priority. What would you tell those people that, maybe don't have time to go out and canvas and all these different things? Like, what would be to you a good way to keep them involved in politics without having to sign up for so many different things?
Right, and that's a really good question. Look, politics is in everything, whether you like it or not. Politics is in is it's in the streets you drive on. It's in the traffic lights, as you were mentioning. It comes down to those red light cameras that you hate and you want to get rid of. Maybe it comes down to also the type of parks that you have, the representation you're getting. So politics is in everything that you do. Regulations to your business. You don't like regulations, go and fight against those regulations. Politics is in everything. And so the most simple thing you could do is go out and vote. Maybe you don't want to canvas. Maybe you hate campaigning. You don't like the chit chattering. You don't like the mudslinging. You don't like any of that. I understand. It's okay. Not everyone's meant for politics. Some of us are. We're very passionate about it, and we have a purpose in that. But not everyone has a purpose to be a leader in politics, to be a leader in the government areas. Some people are called to be engineers. Some people are called to be architects. Some people are called to be artists, et cetera, et cetera. So the most simple thing you can do is go out and vote, participate in what this republic offers, what this constitutional republic offers, is which is that voting. And our founding fathers created a system that it's not perfect, but a system that's nearly perfect and has worked for more than 240 years, which is choosing your representatives and keeping the ones that we need and getting rid of the ones that we don't need. And so if you do take your part in voting, you're making sure that your city is going to grow better. They're going to have better parks, better communities, that those red lights cameras are going to get rid of, or they're going to stay if you like them. And those traffic lights are going to get fixed. Those roads are going to be squeaky clean. And so it's important that you participate in the voting process, in the electoral process. And that's the most basic thing that you could do. Apart from that, it all comes down to, if you want to campaign, go campaign. If you want to canvas, but for the most part, people don't do that. It's a very small amount, and sometimes people are paid to campaign, to canvas. It's not always volunteers. Volunteers are the ones that really like it. If you're volunteering, it's because you really like it. You're not getting paid, it's because you really like it. Or it's a family member, et cetera, et cetera. But it all comes down to that vote. It's the most basic thing you could do. And by doing that, you're voicing your opinion and you're letting the people know, hey, I want Joe Martinez, I'm going to say a random name, to be our mayor because he's going to do this, and that. Or I want to make sure that our parks are safe. I'm going to vote for this guy. I'm going to vote for this lady for council because she fights for my right to have a great street, a great park to play on. It all comes down to that. Voting is what we need to do, and a lot of people aren't voting.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And and I guess when it comes down to local politics, I know you're a lot more involved in local politics than I have been. I guess what would your perspective be on people being informed on local politics? Because I know it's very easy to be way more informed on the federal government, on what the president is doing, on whether he went to the bathroom this day, he didn't go this day, right? You know, the media always portraying things in unique different ways. I know that was just a joke, guys. Um, but it's just so many different things that could trigger our focus towards other things, right? What do you think local government could do better when it comes to informing the people about these people? Because at least for me, when before I was canvassing, before I was at least more involved, I would kind of go out of my way to do research on these candidates before voting. But I know most people won't do that. And I see that a lot of times people are swayed by who has the most signs, right? Who has the most signs? Like you're crossing the street, for example, not to discredit anything, right? This is really not to discredit anything. But the person that ran the best campaign for the city of Doral was Christy Fraga, and I completely agree that she was well suited for the position. She was very well placed in that position. But I wonder how many people voted because of how well everything the campaign was going. And I know that that's a big aspect of politics. Um, but I wonder what would it be to have more informed voters, more people that are having the information of these candidates. And it gets more difficult as you get lower in the position. Uh, but I know I have some hope in this. I have hope that people can be more informed in this, and I wonder what you would think about that.
Well, for candidates, I would say not too long ago. So I was at Miami Gardens actually yesterday, helping Orlando Lamas, which is a candidate for city council. Their city, they host a meet the candidate event. And I saw it yesterday, and I'm glad I saw it yesterday.
Hmm.
I'm mentioning this here. I think every city should do that. You know, meet your candidate in person, maybe at a town hall, a community center, at a park where you guys maybe they give speeches, maybe they just go shake hands. That's important because people like seeing when you go out there, you take your time to meet people. I see that firsthand. I remember I was in the campaign for Christie, and you're right, that campaign was run very well. And she would go out and meet people, and people loved that. Apart from the fact that obviously she had a lot of charisma and charm and all that, and that helps. But I'm seeing it here in Sweetwater too. I'm in with Reynaldo Rey and other commissioners and Jose Pepe Diaz, and they're very good at going out and meeting people, meeting the residents, and people like that because you're listening to them. And it's more about the listening than the talking. Now, getting informed on those candidates, for the most part, you're gonna have to do it on your own. It's not that the government's going to provide you a list like here. This is everything they've done. They were born this way. Their colors like this. No, no. You should
Hmm.
go do your research on that for the most part. Don't just vote based on looks. I got that a lot actually in Chrissy's campaign. Some guys were like, "Oh, she's good looking. I'm going to vote for her." You don't even know who she is. What she could be good looking, but maybe she's hollow up here and she has nothing to do for the government. So
Hmm.
unfortunately, that's the case. And
Hmm.
I know looks could help sometimes and all that, but that doesn't mean anything. And being informed when it comes to local government, I think what local governments could do is take more use of social media, 100%, because for the most part, sometimes we get our news through social media, which I don't think is good because for the most part, they're just giving you what you like to hear. I like to, when I get my news, I like to look at both sides, Fox News, CNN. I obviously I tend to listen more to Fox News, and to be honest with you, yeah, it's conservative, but it sounds a little bit more moderated than CNN on a lot of things. CNN sounds a little too liberal sometimes. But again, I'm biased. I'm a Republican. I like looking at both sides, and sometimes I just like reading something that isn't swayed a lot. BBC maybe something like that. But that's me. I do more research. I like reading. Not everyone's gonna do that. So local governments could use more social media. They could use more newsletters, newspapers, even though that's not really in the in anymore. Newspapers, no barely anyone reads anymore. But having articles out there, maybe hosting town halls, hosting events, maybe even the candidates themselves or the commissioners or the mayors or people like community outreach go and knock on doors or go to events and speak to people, or maybe you can request information. There's a lot of things that we could be doing that we're not doing. What I'm seeing firsthand, because I'm the mayor's intern in Doral, she uses newsletters. It's pretty effective. It shows you all the upcoming events in Doral. It shows you her messages that she does, like this month I'm doing this and that, or so sort of those things like that. And it also mentions uh like things that she wants to do, council meetings when they're happening, planning and zoning meetings, or council zoning meetings when they're happening. And that's something that cities should look into and consider. And that's something that I definitely want to bring here to my city. And when God will allow me to be a commissioner one day, I want to bring that in, or maybe even I could say it now at meetings, be like, hey, you guys should be doing this, and that, so we're more informed. So local government has a lot more to do, and I agree that the more local you go, sometimes the less information you get, not necessarily on events, but for sure on what's going on locally. So that's where you have to step up the game and go into meetings. I think it's important that people join council meetings, that they go to meetings, and that they participate, because oftentimes I see it firsthand. Sweetwater, you go in, there's only like 5 people. Doral, I don't know if it's always been this way, but I've been going, and I go because I work there, obviously, and I see a good amount of people. It's not bad, but there could always be more. And it's important that we participate in these meetings. And they do it virtual now. So you don't have to go. You can just stay at your house, sitting in your bed, and you're watching these meetings. And listen in. Sometimes politicians do dirty tricks. They do stuff that thinking that you're not listening, and they'll pass through things. It was happening at school boards. Parents woke up during the pandemic, and now they're going to school boards to fight for their children. And that's great. That's what we need. People active in the political process. And unfortunately, a lot of people are either too afraid to do it, or are just ignorant enough, and they don't do their research, and they can't fix certain things that are going on. Bureaucracies are strong. And the best way to bring down a bureaucracy is when the people wake up and they rise up. And I mean that figuratively. I'm not saying go and attack someone. No, don't do that. We don't we don't want to sponsor violence. We don't want that. We don't want to instigate that. But what we do want to do is create a process, a dialogue where, hey, I think this is wrong. We should change this. Or, hey, I don't like this. We should do that. And that's where we have more involvement, whether you're a parent, whether you're a child, whether you're a brother, a sister, an elder resident, participate. It's important because your voice is important. And we're fortunate enough to live in a country in which we can speak freely without being harassed, or uh, without being persecuted for what we're saying. We could be talking against the government, but we're under the Constitution, under the First Amendment, we're entitled to free speech, and we're blessed and fortunate to have that.
That's great. That's great. You mentioned a lot of great things there, and I think that that's really good to implement that, to be meeting people, meeting those politicians. I did it. I think that that's a pretty good idea because at the end of the day, when people think of politicians, they think of very distant people. Think of people that, oh, they're all the way over there in their government building, and I can never have access to them. So I think that even if it's a little forced, I guess you can say, like going to a park, like intentionally going towards these people, going to meet residents, like going to schools, all these different things. I think that that's a great way to be able to be more exposed in that sense. And everything else you said was accurate as well. But I also had another thing to ask because I know you wanted to speak about how it's not only us, right? It's not only us that matter in a sense, right? The young generation nowadays, the 20-year-olds, the college students, all these different things. One day we're gonna grow up and there's gonna be a whole new generation with God knows what kind of technology and God knows what kind of more distractions can come about. And I know you wanted to speak about how we as a younger generation can then prepare a way for the new generation to sort of pick up on things in politics and continue with that wave. What would you think in that sort?
Well, to me, and the word that really suits this is legacy. To me, legacy is very important because I go to a church called Presencia Iva in the Doral area, and there I learned that it's important to be an example to everyone else, to especially to young people, and I've lived it firsthand. I've lived the fact that maybe I'm worshiping and I raise my hands, and there's a young student near me, or a young guy sitting next to me, and he'll raise his hands, he'll copy me. And that's where I realized, hey, you're setting an example. You need to fight to make sure that example is good, and that they're doing what is necessary and proper to also give an example eventually to another person. And I learned that there. I'm a leader in a youth group. I'm a leader in kids ministry, and to me, I'm very pro legacy, leaving a legacy behind. And when it's our time to give up our seats and power, it's our time to give it up and give it to that next generation, because we can't be sitting there 1,000 years and not giving it up. And so it's important to make sure that we're helping this new generation. And there's a lot of things that we could do. It's whether it's through virtual conversations, whether it's in person, whether it's, hey, I want to mentor you. There's young kids out there that they want to be in politics and they don't know how to get involved. And we could be a bridge to bringing them to community centers, to commission meetings, to council meetings, to a lot of different meetings or events in which they can also learn from us what we're supposed to do. And I really hope and pray that whoever decides to do this sets a good example, because we don't want more corrupt politicians. We don't want people that are just there to fill their pockets, line their pockets, and get the heck out and be rich and live the life they wanted, luxurious life. No, being in politics isn't a career; it's a public service. And some people, if they've been there long enough, it may seem like a career. I honestly believe some of them have been long enough for good reasons. Others have been there for the wrong reasons, obviously. And that just comes down to, like, for instance, ideas of term limits. I've heard of term limits. Funny enough, I disagree with them, because there's very effective leaders that have been there for a long time. And I'll give you a great example. Chuck Grassley, he's been there for 40 years, but he's been good for Iowa. He's been doing good for the state. And so if we get rid of him, then the next person that comes in could that be good or bad, but he won't be as effective for the state. So term limits, it's a very tricky situation there. But I'm very pro Constitution, and the Constitution doesn't have term limits, so I tend to conserve that. I do believe the president should have it, council members should have it, commissioners, mayors, because local level, we don't want a mayor for 40 years and you've never met anyone else. There's not going to be any change. And if he's corrupt, even worse. But I really do believe that we need to fight and ensure that the next generation is being led by people that really care about the community service, and giving back, and looking and caring for elderly people, making sure that our parks are open and safe for the community, that there's policing around the city. And look, that the whole thing of let's get rid of cops. No, no, we need cops, and the same people that are saying let's get rid of cops, they're gonna call a cop eventually. So it's hypocritical. But anyways, I'm not here for that. And we need to give an example. And look, it's not about parties. I'm a Republican. Maybe I'm mentoring someone that wants to be a Democratic politician. I don't mind that. It all comes down to leadership. If you want to be a Democrat, go ahead. I'm not going to blame you. Everyone has their own ways of thinking, and I'm not going to push on you. Oh, you're a socialist, you're a communist. Which, by the way, not every Democrat is that. There are some that 100% I agree that they are, but not all of them are. It's just there's certain things that they do that seems like that. The same way that they could call us fascist, this and that, which is it's unfortunate. And again, that all comes down to polarization. But it's important that we mentor whoever they are, and I don't care what political party. I don't care, as long as we mentor them. Heck, one of the council members from Doral, Maureen Porras, she interned for Ileana Roslenin. She's a Republican, and Maureen is a Democrat. So look at that. She gained invaluable experience from somebody in government. And by the way, she was a very bipartisan leader, if I'm not mistaken. And we're missing that. We're missing that. And I think that's something that we should also help this generation to learn, which is when there's moments where we could come together and bond and get legislation through, do it, because it's for the good of the community, the state, the city, the federal government. And when there's moments where we have to stay in different positions, we'll stay in different positions. And so the best thing we could do is that be a role model, whether it's through social media, whether it's in person. Obviously, in person is much better. You speak to them, you get to know them, and tag them along in a lot of events. And that's what I've been doing. The reason I got involved into all this local politics is because someone reached out to me, or it was at an event, a school board meeting. I met a person, and I got through commission meetings, and I'm here now by the grace of God. And so it's important that we give these young people the best example that we could give of integrity, of honesty, and of public service. It's not about lining your pockets and special interests. It's about meeting residents. It's about meeting the people, and it's about giving back to the community whenever you can and at all moments.
Wow, that was a speech right there. No, it's really great everything you say, and and it's important. It's important what you say, and I really like that you lay down that line that it's not about a party, right? It's not about a party, but it's about having more well-intended politicians, that their intentions are to serve the people, that their intentions are to go for the people. And it's actually quite interesting that you say that, because I've always, although I have my conservative beliefs, the reason why I created this podcast was not, it wasn't to be another Republican, right? It wasn't to be another conservative. It was to be the bridge, right? It's to be the bridge in a polarizing society where we can't have conversations, right? And one of the things that I admire for one of the congressmen that I interned for in the U.S. House of Representatives, Mario Diaz-Balart, is that he stays true to his party and his values and all these different things. But one of the things he told me was that I go for constituents over party. And I was like, wow, not a lot of people would say that. And it got me questioned. It challenged me a little bit, because to think that maybe one day you could vote against your values to an extent because of your constituents, it challenged my beliefs a little bit. And I had to think it through a while, but I respected it, right? I respected it because at the end of the day, what is a politician? It is someone that represents people, right? And the pretty much the party system we have is to set beliefs, is to set values, is to set solution based proposals, right, that differ from one side to the next, right? But more than that is to represent people. It's to represent people, because not everybody can be a politician, and not everyone can sign legislation, right? That's just unrealistic, and which is why our democracy works in the way it works, right? But yeah, I just think that it's important to just continue to have these conversations, and I don't know if there's anything else you have to say, but I'm just like really appreciative of you coming on this podcast and just being able to speak. I think that I learned a little bit more about local politics and everything, which is something that I'm trying to stay more informed in. And I think that you present very great ideas on what can be shifted in this, and hopefully in the collateral, the youth can also become more active as well, because I know it's not only the youth, it's other people that are not involved, but hopefully the youth can get more involved as well, regarding politics and everything. And I don't know if there's any last comments you want to say. Normally, what I like to do in closing out the podcast, or at least what I used to do in the past, was a call to action, right? I don't like to leave people with just listening to something and then at the end of the podcast saying, okay, that was nice, and then forget about it an hour later. Because, with the short attention spans we have, we are very easy to forget things as young people, and a lot of the people that listen to this are young people. So is there anything that you would like to leave them with, of things that they could work on?
Yeah, and what I like to say is get involved. Get involved. As simple as voting or going to your commission meeting and debating something or arguing against something or arguing for something. Get involved. Get involved in local government, get involved in state government, get involved in federal government. And when I mean getting involved doesn't mean you have to take a plane to Washington or Tallahassee. Maybe sometimes you don't have to go to your commission, even though it's near your house. But it's important to write your commissioners, to write to your senators, your state senators, state representatives, to the governor, to whoever you please or you believe that needs to represent you. And then again, they do represent you. Write to them. They're and I hope they're open to listening to you, because oftentimes, or sometimes, I don't want to say oftentimes, sometimes they don't want to listen to you, and that's unfortunate. But persist and be perseverant and just persevere in that sense. And that to me is my call to action. Get involved. Get involved in your community. Get involved in, and it doesn't have to be necessarily politics. But again, politics isn't everything for the most part. But get involved. Get involved. It's as simple as doing a cleanup. Here in the city of Sweetwater, we're doing a cleanup March 19th. It's on a Sunday. Well, we're going to clean up our streets. We're going to make sure that our city is beautified. That's important. Get involved. There's community service hours, but it's not just for that. It's for our city, so that our city looks good, so that it's preserved for the next generations, for people that come here and that they see our city. But not just that, I also want to leave with the well, I want to leave this, and that's to make sure that you're getting into the habit of researching, of doing of research, of looking into the news, of getting informed, because unfortunately a lot of us, we have a lot of information around us, but we're not using it for the right reasons. And I'm not saying pick up a book and read a book. No, not everyone's meant for reading. I'm not meant for math. I love reading. I don't like math. I'll get a headache if I look at a number. But and I'm exaggerating. Obviously, I'm Cuban, but it comes down to be informed. Be informed. Look at the news. Read different articles. I know that sometimes it's very biased, and I see it. I see, especially in this polarized environment, a lot of things are biased. But it's important to be informed and do your research. Know who your candidates are. Know who your city commissioners are. Unfortunately, and it's sad to see, I've seen interviews, I think it's by PragerU, where they go out and they ask, what happened December 7th, 1941? Wasn't that when the atomic bombs were thrown? Or it's sad to see that we don't know our history, we don't know our civics. What's the legislative branch? Isn't that where the president works? No, legislative branch is Congress. And so we need to return to the basics for a lot of us. And it's important that some of us or leaders like us that we show people and that's why I like doing the videos that I do on my Instagram where I talk about the separation of powers, this and that. For the most part, there's a lot of politics in it, but I like talking about the basics because some of us don't even know what a government does, or who the president is. Well, that one's easier to guess because typically people know his name, and eventually it'll be her name. We'll see when that happens, but it comes down to be informed and get involved. Those are the two things that I think are very important. Be informed and be involved. And if I were to place it in an order, be informed and then get involved. Because if you're not informed, how can you get involved? You're just gonna get involved to get involved, and oh yeah, I should get involved, but I don't even know what I'm doing. You know where your city hall is at. Get informed first, then get in. And so that to me is very important. And then again, legacy. Legacy is important, and we need to be that generation that we step up to the plate. And once we get those home runs, once we do what we had to do, we give it to the next people. We give up our power. We do what Washington did, or at least I hope a lot of us do that, where we voluntarily give up our position and other people will come in. And it's important to do that. And it's a public service. It's a public service. It's not a career. If you want a career, study law, study medicine, be a businessman. But politics shouldn't be a career. It's a public service. If you really want a career in politics that's close to that, become a lobbyist, become this. Maybe I shouldn't even be entertaining that for a lot of people because lobbyism is bad sometimes. I tend to think it could be very good for a lot of things. It could be very bad for some things. But if you really want to go that route, government relations, lobbyists, that's different. But politics, that's for public service. That's for community outreach, community service. Don't make it a career. And so that to me are the important things. And just get informed and get involved and legacy.
Wow, there's really nothing more you can add to that, and more than that, I guess I could say that when it comes to getting involved, since a lot of people have so many different passions, it could also be getting involved with a nonprofit. It could also be getting involved on a 5K run that's gonna be funding cancer research, right? There's so many different things in the community, right? Like how you mentioned the beach cleanup, not the beach cleanup, but the street cleanup, but even if there's a beach cleanup that you want to go to, you're passionate about the environment. All these different things can also assist in your community, and you're probably going to be meeting people that are probably more involved in their local government if they're going to these outreach events, and then they can probably inform you about these people that are in politics, and then it's just a domino effect that you could just start getting informed in that aspect. And I completely agree with you when it comes to getting informed first, because even in voting, a lot of people just close their eyes and they just bubble in whichever politician they're like, oh, this name sounds better. And it's actually quite kind of funny because one of my professors in FIU, he had told me that a lot of people thought that the mayor of Miami-Dade County, the current mayor, they thought that she was Hispanic because of the her name, like the way it sounds, right? And so in the ballots, he says there's a lot more people than you would think that see a name that sounds more Hispanic and will be more likely to vote for that person, right? And it's just like that's not the way we should go about things. So I completely agree with getting involved first, and then going out to vote, and then volunteering, and then doing community service, right? On top of voting, right? Like maybe your politics is so far from what you want to be doing, just stay updated with the news, stay updated with your local politics, even if it's just reading once a week about what's going on. Like how you saying, even just knowing who are the main people, who your mayor is, who your congressman is, like these basic things, voting, right? But then also finding finding other endeavors that are community service based that maybe are not connected to politics in any way, but indirectly you are still serving the community. And at the end of the day, if you're saying politics is about public service, those are other ways to be in public service, right? And I don't know if you want to mention like your Instagram handle or anything else. I know you want to run for commissioner, and I know that can definitely help with gaining some traction there, so that people can stay updated with you.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just for that. I also like people to know what I'm doing and what I'm talking
Hmm.
about. And I'm glad that I'm putting out this content because I've actually grown a lot in followers and all that. Not just that, people are also listening to what I want to do, and people start getting the word out there. So my Instagram is at Bryan Bryan underscore or Bryan Q, sorry, BRYANQ underscore 0202. That's my Instagram. That's the one that I use the most. I don't use TikTok. You know, I'm a Republican. I look at TikTok and I go, hold up, there's a lot of spying in there. I don't know about that. Twitter I might get back on because I can put my opinions on there, and I should probably bring that up again. But I don't have Snapchat. I don't have whatever the other social medias are. Instagram's my one to go, and possibly eventually I'll have a YouTube channel on something. I'm thinking about maybe starting like a history type of thing, like a podcast, something. So maybe I'm using your podcast maybe to launch my podcast, which is funny. But yeah, that's my Instagram, Bryan Q underscore O2. And you'll find me there. You'll see me. I post, well, I post every day. And I like getting people informed on history and just seeing a little bit of what I do every day. And me, I don't post everything, guys. Come on, don't post that. I'm in the bathroom. No, I'm posting things that are relevant, that are important. I'm not a social media guy. I'm not on it 24/7, but I like getting it out there because you get to know me better and you get to see what I like and what are my passions, and you get to see what I want to do for my city, for my community, and how I'm getting things through, and you get to see a little bit of my life. So really, it was a pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast, and keep it up. You're doing a great job, and you have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you, of course. And I guess a final note for everyone else watching: make sure to follow the Instagram at the Missing Bridge. And with the time we're recording this, whether it's mid March, mid April, um, whenever you're hearing this, right? Just make sure to keep up with the podcast, or perhaps when you're listening to this, there's more episodes available by that point. So just keep up to date. Keep up to date with the Instagram. I'll be posting more updates on future episodes and all these different things and future guests on the podcast. But with that being said, I thank you, Bryan. And my namesake, we have the same name, so it's pretty funny to say. But thank you for joining me for the relaunch of I guess, a new season for this podcast. And I'll see you guys next time. God bless you all.